Do not let her leave that hall. The Alpha King's voice was quiet, but the words stopped every whisper in the royal chamber. Emily Carter stood at the very back of the wedding hall, her hands folded tightly before her, trying to become invisible beneath the towering arches and golden candlelight. She had promised herself she would not cry tonight. Not here. Not in front of the court. Not in front of the man who had once been her mate and had rejected her when they were barely more than strangers to the power of the crown. The ceremony belonged to someone else. The Alpha King stood beneath the silver royal crest, dressed in black and silver, while the woman beside him wore a gown covered in delicate pearls. Emily had no reason to be noticed. That was exactly how she wanted it. For years, she had learned how to disappear. She had learned to lower her eyes when stronger wolves entered a room, to speak softly when important people were listening, and to accept the word rejected as though it were her true name. Tonight, she had come only because tradition demanded that every former mate witness the royal union. She stood quietly in a simple ivory dress, nothing like the elaborate gown worn by the bride. Then someone near the altar laughed. Emily did not need to hear the words to know they were about her. She felt the familiar ache in her chest and turned slightly toward the doors. She could leave now. No one would stop her. No one would care. She took one careful step. Then another. A sharp pin from the ceremonial flowers brushed against her dress as she passed, catching the fabric. Emily paused and looked down. A small red stain had appeared against the ivory cloth. It was not large, but under the bright candlelight, everyone could see it. The whispers stopped. Emily's face grew warm. She instinctively placed one hand over the mark, wishing she could disappear completely. Across the hall, the Alpha King finally looked at her. His silver-gray eyes locked onto the stain, then moved slowly to her face. For years, he had trained himself not to react when she entered a room. Tonight, something inside him changed. His expression lost its royal calm. His wolf stirred. Beneath the silence, recognizing something his mind had refused to accept. Emily looked away first. She did not want his attention. She did not want his pity. Most of all, she did not want him remembering her now. The Alpha King stepped away from the altar. The bride turned toward him in confusion. The entire court watched as he crossed the marble floor. Emily's heart began to race. He stopped several feet from her, staring at the small red mark on her wedding dress as though it had revealed a truth hidden from him for years. Then his voice broke the silence. Emily. She slowly lifted her eyes. He had not spoken her name like that since the night he rejected her. And this time, there was something in his expression she had never seen before. Regret. Emily had once believed that being rejected was the worst thing the moon goddess could give her. She was wrong. The hardest part was watching the man who rejected her learn to live as though she had never mattered. 3 years earlier, Emily had stood beneath the same silver crest, though the hall had been smaller and the crowd far less important. She had been 20 years old, nervous, hopeful, and completely unaware that her life was about to change. The moment she and Alexander Blackwood met, the bond between them had awakened. Everyone in the room had felt it. Even the elders had gone silent. Emily remembered the warmth that had spread through her chest, the sudden certainty that she had finally found the person destiny had chosen for her. Alexander had looked at her for several long seconds. Then his expression had changed. The council had whispered around him. A king needed a powerful Luna, they said. A weak Omega could not stand beside the throne. Alexander had listened. That was what Emily remembered most. He had listened to them instead of listening to the bond. I reject this bond, he had said at last. The words had left the room silent. Emily had forced herself to remain standing. She had wanted to ask him why. She had wanted to remind him that she had never asked for a crown, never demanded power, and never expected him to choose her because she was perfect. But the answer had already been given. He had chosen the kingdom over her. After that night, Emily returned to her small home on the edge of the Pack territory. She stopped attending royal gatherings. She stopped waiting for Alexander to change his mind. Instead, she found purpose in quiet places. She helped elderly Pack members carry groceries, prepared herbs for the local healer, and spent afternoons teaching young children how to care for injured animals. Her wolf was still considered unusually gentle, but Emily no longer saw that as a flaw. She had learned that strength could be quiet. Alexander, meanwhile, became the ruler everyone expected him to be. He expanded the kingdom, settled disputes between packs, and became known for his discipline and restraint. Whenever Emily's name appeared in a report, he read it without comment. At least, that was what everyone believed. He never asked about her. He never sent for her. He never looked for her. Until tonight. Now, standing in the wedding hall with that small red mark on her ivory dress, Emily could feel his attention following her. She did not understand why he suddenly cared. She had spent 3 years learning how to live without him. She would not let one look destroy that peace. Alexander watched her turn away, and an unfamiliar realization settled over him. He had spent years telling himself that rejecting Emily had been necessary. But seeing her now, standing alone and trying to hide her embarrassment, he could no longer remember what had ever made him believe she was weak. He had not rejected a weak Omega. He had rejected the one person who had never asked him to be anything except himself. And for the first time, the Alpha King wondered whether the greatest mistake of his reign had happened long before he ever took the throne. The wedding hall had begun to quiet, but Emily could still feel hundreds of eyes following her. She wanted to leave before the whispers grew louder. Instead, the Alpha King remained standing only a few feet away, his attention fixed on the small red mark across her ivory dress. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "No. It is nothing." "Then why are you trembling?" She looked down at her hands. She had not realized they were shaking. "Because everyone is watching." Alexander glanced across the hall. The whispers immediately faded. His presence had always been enough to silence a room. Tonight, however, Emily wished he would use that authority somewhere else. "You should return to the ceremony," she said softly. "Your bride is waiting." The words landed harder than she intended. Alexander's expression tightened. Behind him, the bride stood beside the altar, surrounded by her family and several members of the royal council. She looked confused, but Emily could see something else in her eyes. Displeasure. Emily lowered her gaze. She did not want another reason for people to call her a problem. "I am leaving," she said. Alexander stepped aside, but his eyes followed her. Emily walked toward the great doors, holding the edge of her dress carefully so the stain would remain hidden. She had almost reached the entrance when an elderly royal healer hurried toward her. "Wait." Emily stopped. The woman studied her face, then looked at the mark on her dress. Her expression changed. "Where did this come from?" Emily hesitated. A ceremonial pin caught the fabric. The healer nodded slowly, but she did not look convinced. "That is not what concerns me." She reached for Emily's wrist without touching it, as though sensing something in the air around her. "Your energy feels unusual." Emily gave a nervous smile. "I am only an Omega." The healer's eyes sharpened. "That is what everyone has told you." Before Emily could respond, Alexander approached. "What did you find?" The healer looked at him. "Nothing I can explain yet." Alexander's gaze moved back to Emily. Something inside him stirred again, stronger than before. His wolf recognized her presence with an instinct he had spent 3 years suppressing. Emily noticed the change in his expression and stepped back. "Please do not do this." "Do what?" "Look at me as if I suddenly matter." Alexander went still. The words were quiet, but they carried years of pain. "You made your choice 3 years ago," Emily continued. I accepted it. I built a life without you. Please do not make tonight harder than it already is. Alexander had no answer. For once, the king who always knew what to say stood completely silent. Then the healer looked toward the royal council and spoke in a low voice. Your Majesty, I think the mark on her dress may not be the important part. Alexander turned. What is? The healer looked at Emily's hands. The fact that her wolf has awakened. Emily's breath caught. She had always believed her wolf was weak. But deep inside her, something ancient had just opened its eyes. The healer's words left Emily frozen. My wolf, she whispered. The elderly woman nodded, her expression filled with concern and wonder. Something inside you has been asleep for years. Emily looked toward Alexander, expecting disbelief. Instead, the Alpha King was watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. What does that mean? He asked. The healer glanced toward the royal council. It means we should not continue this ceremony until we understand what has awakened. A murmur spread through the hall. Emily immediately felt uncomfortable. She had spent 3 years avoiding attention, and now every noble in the kingdom seemed to be studying her. She took a small step backward. I do not want this. Alexander looked at her. What do you want? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. She looked toward the open doors and imagined walking into the cold night, returning to the quiet life she had built far from the palace. I want to go home. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Then you will. The council reacted immediately. Your Majesty, this cannot wait, one elder insisted. Her wolf has awakened during a royal ceremony. There may be consequences. Emily looked down at her dress. The small red stain suddenly seemed insignificant compared with everything happening around her. I am not a problem to be solved, she said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Alexander looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. 3 years ago, he had allowed the council to decide what she was worth. Tonight, he would not make the same mistake. She is right, he said. The elder frowned. Your Majesty, enough. His voice remained controlled, but there was no uncertainty in it. The ceremony is postponed. Shock swept through the hall. The bride's family exchanged uneasy looks. Emily stared at Alexander. You cannot stop a royal wedding because of me. I can, he replied. And I am. She shook her head. You are making this about me again. His eyes softened. No. I am finally listening to you. Emily did not know how to answer. Those words would have meant everything 3 years ago. Tonight, they only made her remember how long she had waited to hear them. The healer stepped closer and gently examined the silver pendant around Emily's neck. This belonged to your mother, did it not? Emily touched it instinctively. Yes. My grandmother gave it to me when I was a child. The healer's face changed. Then we may have found the reason your wolf remained hidden for so long. Alexander looked at the pendant. What are you saying? The healer turned toward him. Your Majesty, I believe Emily's wolf is connected to an old royal bloodline. Emily's breath caught. The whispers began again. But this time, Alexander did not look at the council. He looked only at her. And Emily realized that the wedding had not been interrupted because of a stain on her dress. It had been interrupted because the woman everyone had rejected might have been carrying a secret powerful enough to change the kingdom. The healer's words seemed to echo through the silent hall. Connected to an old royal bloodline. Emily repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The healer nodded. Your mother carried a gift that disappeared from the royal family decades ago. We believed the bloodline had ended. Emily touched the pendant at her neck. Suddenly, the simple silver piece she had worn since childhood felt heavier than before. My mother never told me any of this. Perhaps she was protecting you, the healer said. Across the hall, Alexander remained still. The wedding guests had stopped whispering, waiting for the king to decide what would happen next. But Alexander was no longer thinking about the ceremony. He was thinking about the night 3 years ago when he had rejected Emily. He remembered the council telling him that a weak Omega would make the kingdom question his judgment. He remembered looking into her eyes and choosing fear over the bond he felt between them. Now he wondered how much of that decision had been based on a lie. I want the royal archives opened, he said. An elder immediately stepped forward. Your Majesty, those records are restricted. Alexander's gaze hardened. Then I am lifting the restriction. The elder hesitated. There may be nothing relevant inside. Then we lose nothing by looking. Emily watched him carefully. She had expected him to defend his crown. Instead, he was questioning the very people who had influenced his decision years ago. Still, she could not forget what had happened. Why are you doing this? She asked. Alexander turned toward her. Because I should have asked questions 3 years ago. His answer was simple. It did not erase anything, but it sounded honest. The royal healer motioned toward Emily. There is another way to learn the truth. She led Emily toward the ancient moonstone at the center of the hall. The stone had been used for generations to recognize rare royal gifts. Emily stopped several feet away. I do not know what I am supposed to do. Nothing complicated, the healer said. Place your hand on the stone and let your wolf respond naturally. Emily looked at Alexander. He did not tell her what to do. He simply nodded, giving her the choice. She stepped forward and placed her hand against the cool white surface. At first, nothing happened. Then warmth moved through her palm. A soft silver light appeared beneath her fingers. The 7-pointed star symbol on her pendant began to glow. The royal healer inhaled sharply. It is her. The chamber erupted in astonished whispers. Emily pulled her hand away, overwhelmed. Alexander stepped closer, but stopped before reaching her. Are you all right? She nodded slowly. I think so. He looked at the glowing moonstone, then back at her. For the first time, he understood the truth. Emily had never been the weak link in his destiny. She had been the part of it he had been too afraid to recognize. And now the entire kingdom was beginning to see what he had refused to see 3 years ago. The royal healer closed the ancient archive with trembling hands. There is no mistake, she said. Emily's mother was the last known moon healer. Emily stared at the old record spread across the table, each page carrying a history she had never known. Her mother had not been an ordinary woman who disappeared from her life. She had once stood close to the royal family, carrying a gift that could calm troubled wolves and restore what others could not. Emily's throat tightened. Then why did no one tell me? The healer looked toward Alexander. Because someone wanted your identity hidden. Alexander's expression became serious. Who? Before the healer could answer, the chamber doors opened. A royal advisor entered carrying another sealed document. Your Majesty, the records from Thorn Valley have arrived. Emily felt her heart sink. Thorn Valley. Her home. The place where she had spent years believing she was nothing special. Alexander took the document and broke the seal. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. This was signed by your father, he said quietly. Emily stepped closer. My father? She had rarely heard his name mentioned. The document revealed that years ago, her family had been instructed to keep Emily's royal connection secret. Her mother had feared that Emily would be taken to the palace before she was ready. She had chosen a quiet life for her daughter instead. Emily lowered her gaze, struggling to absorb it all. So my entire life was built around a secret. Not because you were unwanted, the healer said gently. Because someone wanted you protected. Emily looked toward Alexander. And you knew nothing? He shook his head. I knew nothing about your bloodline when I rejected you. His voice carried a regret he no longer tried to hide. But I knew what I felt when I stood beside you. Emily looked away. That did not stop you. Alexander accepted the truth without defending himself. No. It did not. The honesty surprised her. He did not ask her to forgive him. He did not blame the council. He simply stood there and admitted that the choice had been his. The healer approached Emily with a small wooden box. Inside was a delicate silver ring bearing the same 7-star symbol as her pendant. Your mother left this for you. Emily touched it carefully. Warmth moved through her fingers, and her wolf stirred again, not with fear, but with recognition. She closed her eyes. For the first time, she could feel her wolf clearly. It was calm, steady, and strangely familiar, like a voice that had been waiting patiently beneath years of silence. Then a soft whisper came through the bond. You were never broken. Emily opened her eyes. Tears filled them, but she smiled. Across the room, Alexander watched her with quiet wonder. The woman he had once called too weak to stand beside a king was discovering a strength he could no longer deny. But the revelation brought another truth with it. If Emily's mother had hidden her royal heritage, there had to be a reason. And somewhere inside the kingdom, someone still knew why. The secret had followed Emily all the way to the palace, and now it was beginning to surface. She stood beside the moonstone with the silver ring resting in her palm, trying to understand how a life she had known for 23 years could suddenly feel unfamiliar. Her mother had protected her. Her father had signed the order. The royal court had known nothing. And somewhere beyond these walls, one person still knew the full truth. Alexander remained near the table, reading the old documents again. He had become quieter since the discovery, as though every page forced him to confront another part of the past. Emily watched him for a moment. Why did you reject me? The question finally came. Alexander looked up. He did not try to avoid it. Because I was afraid. Emily had expected a political explanation. She had expected him to blame the council, the kingdom, or the expectations placed upon a king. Instead, he gave her the truth. I believed the king could not afford to choose someone others considered weak. I thought strength meant having the approval of everyone around me. Emily's eyes lowered. And you believed I would make you look weak? Yes. The answer hurt, even though she already knew it. Alexander took a slow breath. I was wrong. The words were simple, but Emily could feel the weight behind them. You cannot undo 3 years with one apology, she said. I know. Then what do you want from me? Alexander stepped closer, but stopped several feet away, giving her space. Nothing tonight. Emily looked at him, surprised. Nothing. You have spent years being told what you should be. What you should accept. Who you should become. I will not be another person deciding that for you. His words settled between them. For the first time since she had entered the palace, Emily felt no pressure from him. Then the royal doors opened. The council entered, followed by the bride and her family. The room became tense again. The senior counselor looked toward Emily and then toward Alexander. Your Majesty, the wedding cannot remain suspended indefinitely. Alexander turned toward the court. It is suspended until the truth about Emily's lineage is understood. The bride's father stepped forward. And what of my daughter's future? Alexander looked at him with calm regret. She deserves a marriage built on certainty, not a ceremony continued because everyone is afraid to stop it. Emily watched the bride quietly leave the center of the hall, her expression shaken but dignified. Then the counselor spoke again. Your Majesty, if Emily truly carries royal blood, she must be presented to the kingdom. Emily's stomach tightened. She had spent years trying not to be seen. Now the entire kingdom might be watching her. Alexander looked at her. He did not command her. He waited. Emily remembered his promise. He would not decide for her. She lifted her chin. Let them see me. A faint surprise crossed his face. Emily looked around the chamber, no longer hiding behind lowered eyes. I have spent enough of my life being ashamed of what I am. The Alpha King stood beside her, silent and steady. This time, he was not choosing for her. He was simply standing with her. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, a forgotten truth was waiting to be revealed before the entire kingdom. By morning, the kingdom knew her name. Emily stood before the palace doors as hundreds of wolves gathered in the royal courtyard, their voices rising in uncertain whispers. She had never imagined standing before so many people, much less as the subject of their attention. Yet when she looked down at her hands, they were steady. The frightened Omega who had once hidden at the edge of every gathering was still inside her, but she was no longer allowing fear to decide where she stood. Alexander walked beside her, dressed in his dark royal coat, but he kept several respectful steps between them. He had promised not to decide her future, and he was keeping that promise. The royal healer stepped onto the palace balcony and raised the ancient silver pendant. Emily Carter carries the bloodline of the moon healer, she announced. The courtyard fell silent. Some faces showed disbelief. Others showed wonder. Emily heard one voice whisper that she had been rejected for a reason. Another called her an unexpected threat to the royal order. The words still hurt, but they no longer controlled her. Alexander stepped forward. She is not here because I chose her, he said. She is here because she has earned the right to know who she is. The council stood behind him, uneasy. One elder finally spoke. Your Majesty, if she carries this gift, then she may be the true mate chosen by the moon. Emily's heart tightened at the word mate. She looked at Alexander. 3 years ago, that word had meant everything to her. Now it felt complicated, fragile, and unfinished. Alexander did not move toward her. The bond does not give me ownership of her, he said. It gives us a choice. Emily stared at him. Those were not the words she expected from a king. The courtyard remained silent as he continued. I rejected her once because I believed power mattered more than trust. I will not repeat that mistake by demanding she accept me now. A murmur moved through the crowd. Emily felt tears gather in her eyes, but she refused to look away. Then what happens now? She asked. Alexander answered quietly. You decide. The simplicity of those words reached deeper than any royal declaration could have. Emily looked toward the distant mountains, thinking of the small home where she had spent years rebuilding her life. She remembered every time she had been told she was weak. Every time. She had lowered her eyes. Every time Alexander had chosen silence instead of standing beside her. She had wanted him to regret losing her. Now she realized something had changed. She no longer needed his regret to know her worth. Emily turned back toward him. I need time. Alexander nodded immediately. Take all the time you need. For the first time, the Alpha King did not try to claim the woman standing before him. He simply respected her choice. And as Emily walked away from the palace with the 7-star pendant resting against her heart, Alexander watched her go, knowing that if she ever returned, it would not be because destiny forced her to. It would be because she had chosen him. 3 days passed before Emily returned to the palace. She did not come because the council summoned her. She did not come because the moon goddess demanded it. She came because, after 3 quiet days in the home she had built for herself, she realized there was one question she still wanted answered. Alexander was waiting in the palace garden when her carriage arrived. He stood beneath an old oak tree, dressed simply in his dark royal coat, without a crown or ceremony around him. When he saw Emily step onto the stone path, he did not move toward her. He simply waited. Emily walked closer, the 7-star pendant resting against her chest. "You said I could choose," she began. Alexander nodded. "I meant it." She looked at him for a long moment. "I thought I wanted you to regret rejecting me. I thought I wanted you to understand what you lost." Alexander lowered his eyes. "You deserve to hear that." Emily shook her head gently. "Maybe. But that is not what I want anymore." He looked up. "Then what do you want?" Emily took a slow breath. "I want to know if the man standing here is the same man who rejected me 3 years ago." Alexander was silent. "He is," he finally said. "But he is no longer willing to make decisions from fear." Emily felt something loosen inside her. She had expected a grand promise, perhaps a declaration before the entire kingdom. Instead, Alexander offered honesty. "I cannot change what I did," he continued. "I cannot give those years back to you. But I can spend the years ahead proving that I understand what I failed to see." Emily looked toward the palace towers. "And if I say no? Then I will respect you. Even if the bond remains. Even then." Her eyes returned to his. That was the moment she understood what had truly changed. The Alpha King who once believed love was a weakness had finally learned that love could not exist without freedom. Emily stepped closer. "I am not returning because I am your rejected mate." Alexander remained perfectly still. "Then why are you here?" A small smile appeared on Emily's face. "Because I want to choose you." For the first time, the guarded expression on Alexander's face broke. Relief filled his eyes, but he did not reach for her until she offered her hand. When their hands met, the familiar warmth returned, gentle and steady, like sunlight after a long winter. Emily looked toward the kingdom beyond the garden walls. The people who once called her weak would soon know her as something else. Not because she had become powerful enough to demand their respect, but because she had learned to respect herself. Alexander stood beside her, no longer asking her to prove that she belonged beside a king. He simply walked with her. And as the first evening stars appeared above the palace, Emily understood that destiny had never been about forcing two hearts together. It had been about giving them the courage to choose each other freely.